Welcome, everyone. Let's jump right in. Today, we are exploring an absolute game changer of a framework for the modern workplace. It's called the Edmondson Matrix, Finding the Learning Zone. We're going to unpack exactly how leaders can balance mental health and high performance in their project teams. Because, spoiler alert, you don't actually have to sacrifice one to achieve the other. It's a fascinating map, so let's get started.
Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll kick things off with the reality of burnout, dive into the Edmondson Matrix, navigate the 4 operational zones, find that elusive learning zone, and then wrap up with some practical tools for balanced leadership.
All right, Section 1, the reality of burnout and the incredibly high stakes of modern work.
Okay, I want you to consider this staggering number, 76%. According to Mindshare Partners' Mental Health at Work report, 76% of employees said they experienced at least one symptom of a mental health condition in the past year. Let that sink in for a second. If you look around your project team, the vast majority of those folks are dealing with some kind of emotional or psychological strain. Project management is already a high-pressure gig with competing demands and crazy deadlines, but the human cost here is just way too massive to ignore.
And let's break down exactly what's driving that 76%. 56% of those individuals are dealing with straight-up burnout. 46% are facing depression, and 40% are struggling with anxiety. This is usually fueled by emotionally draining work, zero work-life balance, and a total lack of recognition. And the so what for organizations? It's huge. Productivity falls off a cliff, people are only performing at a fraction of what they're capable of, and turnover just skyrockets. We're looking at a literal crisis here.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Edmondson Matrix, and mapping the workplace.
To actually diagnose what's going on with a team, we have to turn to Harvard professor Amy Edmondson's brilliant framework. Think of it like 2 intersecting lines. On one side, we have psychological safety. This is that vital sense that anyone can speak up, pitch a crazy idea, or admit a total failure without worrying they'll be punished or humiliated. On the other side, we have accountability. These are the performance goals, the hard standards, the expectations people have to meet. Now, the absolute magic, and honestly the danger, lies in how these 2 forces bump into each other.
Let's see how that works in Section 3, Navigating the 4 Zones, or as I like to think of them, the danger zones. First up, we have the apathy zone. This is what happens when both psychological safety and accountability are rock bottom. People might physically show up, but they're definitely not showing up, Expectations are murky or just incredibly low, and psychological safety is completely non-existent. Because nobody feels safe, everyone just plays defense. It's the ultimate clock in, clock out mentality. They keep their heads down, they don't really contribute, and mental health just tanks here because employees feel stuck, totally unseen, and completely disconnected from any real purpose.
Now, what if we crank up the expectations but leave safety in the basement? Well, welcome to the anxiety zone. Accountability is sky high, but psychological safety is dangerously low. Everything is high stakes, the pressure is constantly on, but there is zero breathing room to ask a question, make a mistake, or just be vulnerable. If you fail, you are penalized, period. This is your classic textbook recipe for rapid burnout. Actually, this is exactly where that 76% statistic we talked about earlier is born. Mental health completely unravels here, despite how hard everyone is working.
So, let's look at the flip side, the comfort zone. Here, you have high psychological safety, but really low accountability. The team feels wonderfully safe, everyone is super friendly, but there are no goals. Nobody is pushing anyone to excel. And while this might sound like a mentally healthy paradise on the surface, that total lack of challenge is a trap. It leads straight to boredom, a huge drop in motivation, and eventually, quiet quitting. The team's progress just totally stalls out.
Moving on to Section 4, Finding the Learning Zone. This is where mental health and innovation actually thrive. Because this is it, the holy grail, the learning zone. This is where high psychological safety meets high accountability. In this zone, individuals and teams don't just survive, they completely thrive. People feel 100% safe to speak up or hit the brakes if a project is going off the rails, but they are also deeply challenged to hit really high standards. Mistakes aren't weaponized here, they're genuine learning moments. Creativity is celebrated. So the biggest takeaway today is this: true mental health really only lives in the learning zone. It's the one spot where innovation, engagement, and well-being all flourish together. But we need a reality check. Moving your team into the learning zone requires serious, deliberate intention. It absolutely doesn't happen by accident, and it for sure doesn't happen just because HR rolled out a new wellness app. Leaders have to actively construct this environment.
You have to literally weave well-being into the daily fabric of your team, and that takes conscious effort and real structural shifts in how you communicate and set your goals.
Let's look at a real-world example of this intention. Take HubSpot. Despite their massive growth, they realized burnout was becoming this sort of unspoken ghost in the room. So they pushed back with a radical, open and honest policy. They turned town halls into safe spaces for really tough questions. But the actual game changer? The executives started sharing their own personal struggles with burnout and work-life balance. They modeled the vulnerability themselves. When leaders do that, it shatters the stigma. It proves that being vulnerable isn't a weakness, it's a strength. And that single move dragged their whole corporate culture right into the learning zone.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, Tools for Balanced Leadership and Navigating Your Team to Safety.
I want to introduce you to a fantastic tool called the CURE method. Look, when tensions flare up, maybe your team is suddenly sliding into that anxiety zone and conflict is brewing, you need a structured lifeline to pull them back. The CURE method is designed exactly for those moments. It's for conflict resolution and re-engagement when stakes are high and trust has sort of evaporated. So let's break down CURE. Step 1, you collect. You just gather information and perspectives without any bias. Step 2, you understand, meaning you focus on both the cold, hard facts, but also the team's messy emotions. Step 3 is recover. This is where you gently steer those tense conversations away from blame and back toward outcomes. And finally, engage. You get everyone aligned around shared goals to build that trust back up. It's such a practical, step-by-step way to rebuild psychological safety. Now, getting to the learning zone means communication has to flow perfectly in two directions. First, you need a bottom-up approach. This means truly empowering your employees. You trust them to make choices about their own well-being, you let them champion initiatives, and you actually act on what they tell you. But, and this is crucial, that only works if there's a top-down approach meeting it halfway. Leaders have to model this stuff. If you're the boss and you never take a lunch, or you're firing off emails at midnight, your team is going to copy that exact behavior. You have to set the standard yourself.
So, to tie this all together, here are some totally actionable steps you can start using today. First, explicitly normalize mistakes. Talk about a project you messed up in your next team meeting. Second, create a blame-free environment. When things go sideways, stop asking who did this and start asking what can we learn from this. Third, don't just wait for feedback. Actively hunt for it and then actually use it. And finally, ensure equitable participation. Don't just let the loudest person run the room. Mix it up and rotate your meeting facilitators. I want to wrap up this explainer by leaving you with a pretty provocative question. Take a really honest look at your own team dynamics right now. Are you stuck in the apathy zone? Are you grinding away in the anxiety zone? Or maybe you're just coasting in the comfort zone. Which zone is your team operating in today? And more importantly, what is one single, concrete step you can take today to steer your people toward the learning zone? Remember, being a great leader isn't about having all the answers. It's about building a space where everyone feels safe enough to ask the right questions. Thanks so much for joining me, and I really hope you use this map to start transforming your workplace today.